She arrived at the front desk with a suitcase in one hand and the weight of a lifetime in the other. The lobby glowed with warm lights, but the eyes that met her were cold. The receptionist's smile vanished the moment she saw her brown skin. The card in her wallet said she owned this place. The looks on their faces said she didn't even belong there. The line behind her grew. Whispers started. They refused her ID. Questioned her credit card. Spoke to her like a criminal. Then, in front of everyone, they told her she wasn't the right kind of guest, and quietly called security. What none of them knew was who they had just tried to erase. And what would happen when the truth finally came out? If you care about powerful black racism stories and dignity, subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Her name was Nadia Johnson, and on paper, she was everything this hotel was proud to show off. Self-made entrepreneur. First black woman in the city to own a luxury boutique hotel. Smiling face once used in their own marketing to prove how inclusive they were. Most days, she moved through this lobby as the invisible heartbeat of the place. She knew the staff schedules by memory. She remembered guests' names from months ago. She could spot a crooked painting or a scuffed piece of marble from across the room. This hotel was her dream turned concrete and glass. Her late nights. Her maxed-out credit cards. Her sacrifices. But lately, she had noticed something that didn't sit right. A coldness in how some employees treated certain guests. A quiet change of tone when a black family walked in. A pretend smile that stopped just short of being real. She told herself she'd deal with it. Have another meeting. More training. Another reminder about company values. Tonight, though, she wasn't here as the owner in a blazer and name tag. She was here in travel clothes, after a long flight, with no announcement, no entourage. Just a tired black woman walking into her own lobby. To the staff behind the front desk, she wasn't a boss. She wasn't a success story. She was just another face they thought they could judge in a split second. And as Nadia wheeled her suitcase toward the counter, she had no idea this ordinary check-in would reveal exactly what had been hiding in her own hotel all along. Nadia rolled her suitcase across the polished floor, the wheels echoing softly under the chandelier light. She felt that familiar blend of pride and exhaustion every time she walked into this place. Her place. But tonight, no one recognized her. The young woman at the desk glanced up, her polite smile flickering the second her eyes landed on Nadia's face. It was quick. Almost nothing. But Nadia had lived long enough to feel when a room shifted because she walked into it. She said she was checking in, sliding her ID and credit card forward. The receptionist took them with 2 fingers, like they were slightly dirty. Her eyes barely skimmed the ID before her brows pulled together. She glanced at the name. Then at Nadia. Then back at the name again, as if something didn't add up. She typed slowly, heavily, like each keystroke cost her effort she didn't want to spend. The line behind Nadia grew. She could feel eyes on the back of her neck, the weight of impatient guests, and silent judgments. Minutes ticked by. The woman at the desk side looked up, but not with warmth. With suspicion. She said they weren't finding her reservation a little too loud. Nadia stayed calm. She had watched this exact scenario play out with other guests, and she knew how it should go. Apologize. Search again. Offer help. But that wasn't what happened. The receptionist suggested that maybe she had booked the wrong hotel. Said this was a luxury property. Asked if she was sure this was the right place. The words stung. Not because Nadia needed their validation. But because she'd heard this tone in 1,000 different forms her whole life. That subtle way of saying, "You don't fit here." Nadia explained again. Gave the confirmation number. The date. Her name. The same name printed on the legal documents, the bank loans, the deed. The receptionist barely looked at the screen. She called another employee over. Whispers. Both of them looked at Nadia in that sideways way. Not openly rude. Not openly kind. Just calculating. Another guest walked up beside her. A white man in a suit. He didn't wait for his turn. He didn't have to. The second employee immediately turned away from Nadia and greeted him with a bright smile. Warm. Welcoming. Good evening, sir. Welcome back. How can I help you? They checked him in. Fast. Efficient. Friendly. No extra questions. No doubt. Nadia stood there, invisible in the hotel she had built. The receptionist returned, her tone colder now. She announced that the card wasn't going through. Asked if Nadia had another form of payment. Suggested that maybe a cheaper option somewhere else would be better. Nadia's stomach tightened. She knew her card limit, her bank balance, and the financial structure of this entire building. The problem wasn't the card. It was her. She asked to speak to a manager. The receptionist's jaw tensed, like she'd been expecting that. She stepped back, picked up the phone, and dialed. But she didn't lower her voice. She told whoever was on the other end that Nadia was refusing to leave the desk. Said she had no reservation, a declined card, and that she was getting difficult. Difficult. Nadia hadn't raised her voice once. A few guests shifted away from her, just slightly. Enough to make space. Enough to mark her. Security appeared at the edge of the lobby, summoned by a story that had already painted her as a problem. And as they started walking toward her, the real question wasn't whether she would get a room that night. It was how far they were willing to go to keep a black woman in her place, in a hotel that didn't even exist without her. Security moved toward her in slow, heavy steps, as if she were a threat and not the woman who signed their paychecks. 2 guards. Broad shoulders. Dark uniforms. Hands resting just close enough to their radios to make a point. The lobby went quiet in that strange, heavy way. Not silent, just swallowed. The clink of glasses at the bar. The faint music overhead. But every eye was on her. The manager finally emerged from the back office. Tablet in hand. Tired expression. He didn't look at her ID. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't even say her name. He spoke to her like a problem to be removed. He told her she was disturbing the guests. Said that if she didn't have a valid reservation and couldn't provide proper payment, they'd have to ask her to leave. Nadia's heart hammered in her chest, but her voice stayed low, steady. She said she was the owner of this hotel. A few people in line snorted, a quiet disbelief. The receptionist rolled her eyes, just enough for Nadia to see. The manager didn't even flinch. He repeated himself, calling her ma'am, condescension dripping from every syllable, and said they didn't have time for games. Security would escort her out now. One of the guards stepped closer, close enough that she could see the scar on his wrist, the discomfort in his eyes. He wouldn't meet her gaze. He didn't want to be here. But he still moved as ordered. Her ID sat on the counter between them, ignored. Her name glowed from the screen that the manager never checked. The legal proof of her ownership lay inches away, and still, none of them believed she had the right to stand there. Because to them, a black woman raising her voice even slightly was dangerous. A black woman standing her ground was difficult. A black woman claiming power was unthinkable. The guard reached for her arm. And in that electric second, with the crowd watching and her own staff trying to push her out of her own lobby, Nadia made a decision that would change every life in that room. Nadia didn't step back. Instead, she reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and opened an email every person in that lobby could understand, the official ownership papers, contracts, signatures, the legal proof with her name printed again and again. She laid the screen on the counter. No drama. No shouting. Just cold, undeniable truth. She told them to read it. The manager hesitated, then glanced down. And in one breath, his entire posture changed. His eyes widened. His face drained of color. His lips parted, but no words came out. The guards froze. The receptionist stared, her confidence cracking. The guests who had been silently judging her a moment earlier suddenly looked anywhere but at her. Nadia took her ID back. Took her card. Took her power. She didn't yell. She didn't curse. She did something quieter and far more devastating. Right there, in the middle of the lobby, she told the manager and every employee involved that their services were no longer needed. Effective immediately. Their badges, their access, their authority in that building gone. The same people who had tried to push her out now stood speechless, realizing they had just profiled and humiliated the one person they couldn't afford to disrespect. But for Nadia, it wasn't just about firing a few staff members. It was about the pattern. Because this story isn't rare. It's not an isolated moment. It's a mirror showing how quickly black people are treated as suspects in spaces they built, paid for, or earned their way into. Nadia went on to rebuild her team. To hire people who saw guests as human beings, not categories. But the sting of that night never fully left. Not because they didn't recognize her as the owner. Because, deep down, they never believed someone who looked like her could be. So here's the question: how many more hotels, offices, schools, and streets will repeat this same story before we stop acting surprised and start acting accountable? And if this were you, would you have stayed silent, or would you have done what Nadia did?